Ladies and gentlemen, the good, the bad, and the Queen.
Anyone familiar with my channel has heard that name countless times before. Initially formed in 2006, The Good, the Bad, and the Queen was a group composed of 4 extremely famous and influential musicians, but despite being big stars, their debut album, The Good, the Bad, and the Queen, was largely overlooked at the time of its release and still remains a hidden gem to this day. Considering the fact that each of these 4 band members have fan bases of their own, I personally find it very odd that this album isn't more well known. I find it to be a genuine masterpiece and a real standout of all 4 of these musicians' careers. The Good, the Bad, and the Queen is my favorite album of all time, and it's an album that I feel is very underappreciated by fans of these artists and audiences in general. And we're going to find out why in today's episode of Criminally Underrated Media. And just to get it out of the way, I know what you're thinking, I know I look a little different, and yes, I got a haircut, and my background moves now. The Good, the Bad, and the Queen is not just a group, but a supergroup, which is defined as an exceptionally successful rock group, or one formed by musicians who are already famous from their previous work. A few notable examples would be Traveling Wilburys, Led Zeppelin, Temple of the Dog, and the Dead Weather, who were featured on the Gorillaz radio series, Pirate Radio.
Here is the Dead Weather with Treat Me Like Your Mother. Oh.
The Good, the Bad, and the Queen fall into the latter definition of the word. There are 4 members of the group, 5 depending on who you ask. If you're asking me, there were 5, at this point anyway, and all 5 of these individuals were already famous for their other work. Our lead singer is Damon Albarn, who was most well known for fronting Blur and Gorillaz, Blur being one of the most successful Britpop bands of all time, and Gorillaz being one of the most successful virtual bands of all time. But I think calling him the frontman of Gorillaz would be giving him a little too much credit. We all know he's just 2D's vocal coach.
Ooh, nobody knows it. Nobody.
On bass, we have Paul Simonon. He's most famous for being one of the original members of The Clash, one of the most influential punk bands of all time. They're known for hits like Should I Stay or Should I Go, used in Stranger Things, London Calling, used in Night at the Museum 3, and Guns of Brixton, which was written and sung by Paul. Even if you haven't heard a single song of theirs, you probably recognize this album cover, which is actually a photo of Paul. The cover itself is an homage to the cover of Elvis Presley, an album by, I think it was Austin Butler.
Fuckers in school always tell me, always in the barbershop. Chief Keef ain't about this, Chief Keef ain't about that. Shut the these bitches up. Elvis.
In addition to being a very talented bassist, Paul is also a very talented visual artist. Our guitarist is Simon Tong, most well known for his work with The Verve. I'm sure you've all heard Bittersweet Symphony at least once. Somewhat bafflingly, the song was recently used in a Publix commercial. Wow, I can't think of a better song to sell stuff with. Like, what's next? You're gonna use Feel Good Inc. to sell iPods? Publix is a grocery store in the southeastern United States, by the way. If you're not familiar, I honestly feel kind of bad for you because their ice cream is great, their cake is even better, and their raspberry sweet tea is heaven. Simon Tong actually briefly played guitar for Blur. There was a period of time where original guitarist Graham Coxon had left the band, and their 2003 album Think Tank was recorded and released without him. The band subsequently went on tour, with Simon replacing Graham. He also worked with Gorillaz on Demon Days, specifically the tracks Last Living Souls, Oh Green World, Feel Good Inc., El Mañana, and All Alone. How kind of him to help Noodle out. Our drummer is the late, great Tony Allen. Originally from Nigeria, Tony Allen was best known for his work with fellow Nigerian artist Fela Kuti as part of Africa 70, where he helped create and define the genre of Afrobeat. He's considered by many to be among the best drummers who have ever lived, and by many, I mean Brian Eno and me. So how did these 4 artists, coming from such different backgrounds, dealing in such different genres, ever come together to form a band? Well, Damon is someone who's always had his fingers in a lot of pies. Blur would be steak and kidney pie, or whatever it is they eat over there. Gorillaz would be banana cream, and his solo stuff is like a parakeet pie. What would eventually become The Good, the Bad, and the Queen started back in the early 2000s. Tony had actually reached out to Damon after Blur released their song Music Is My Radar in 2000, which references Tony Allen in its lyrics. Simon Tong was not involved with the song, in case you were wondering. This was like 3 years or so beforehand. Damon and Tony had been recording in Nigeria, and they brought Simon along with them, but Damon moved on to other things, as he often does, and the project didn't really get off the ground until after the release of the Gorillaz album Demon Days in 2005. For Demon Days, Damon had joined forces with Simon, obviously, but also with Danger Mouse, who produced the album. He's had a super interesting career in his own right, from his solo work to his work producing with Adele, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and A$AP Rocky, just to name a few, to his big hit with Gnarls Barkley, to his work with Broken Bells, the latter two both being additional examples of a supergroup, Gnarls Barkley being formed with CeeLo Green, and Broken Bells with James Mercer of The Shins. New Slang, by the way, one of my favorite songs of all time. He was also one half of Danger Doom. It was him and MF Doom.
Number 8 is great. Who we got today? We got Lang with a bang. Bitches came in. He shoots, he misses. But it's alright, cause he's holding off the point, waiting for the...
They'd previously collaborated on Demon Days. This guy's up to his ears in super groups. Why does he look like he's about to sing at me about potato niches? Potato niches? Telling all their business, sit in the court and be their own star witness. Although Danger Mouse unfortunately was not involved in The Good, the Bad, and the Queen's second album, Maryland, he was considered by many to be an unofficial fifth member of the group at the time. And by many, I mean me. So after Demon Days, around 2006, Damon returned to the project with Danger Mouse in tow, and shortly scrapped everything they had done so far. Tony and Simon were brought back in, and now all they needed was a bassist. So Damon had actually first met Paul all the way back in 1995 at the Clash vocalist Joe Strummer's wedding to Lucinda Tate. Oh, okay. According to Damon and Paul, they first met at the wedding reception when Chrissy Hynde of the Pretenders brought Damon as an impromptu +1 and then initiated a group hug. Fast forward about 10 years later, Damon calls Paul out to Lagos to work with him, Tony, and Simon, effectively bringing him out of retirement as he'd given up music for visual art about 15 years prior, and that's when they became a proper band. So the group kind of assembled around this project that Damon already had in mind, and I think that's pretty interesting. Instead of these four people getting together with the intention of making music, the project was already there, and the band then formed around it with the goal of executing this vision. On January 22nd, 2007, the group released their debut album, The Good, the Bad, and the Queen. This project was technically not a self-titled album, as the group didn't actually have a name, even though they were commonly referred to as The Good, the Bad, and the Queen at the time, even in their own marketing. But the group themselves weren't even really calling themselves a band, much less a supergroup. According to Paul, this was because the album was meant to be a one-off situation, and a name is for a marriage. They more or less adopted the name The Good, the Bad, and the Queen for the release of their second album, Maryland, in 2018. There were 3 singles from this debut album: Herculean, Kingdom of Doom, and Green Fields. Outside of these singles, promotion for this album was pretty limited, other than a few live performances in some smaller venues and late-night talk shows, and a few interviews across different magazines. This album does have a single guest feature, that being the British choir The 16 on the song Herculean. The 16 have been around since the 70s and perform pieces spanning the past 500 years of English history, which makes them a perfect fit for this album, but we'll get into why a little bit later. That song is actually German and way older than 500 years, but I liked it, so I'm putting the clip in there anyway. Other than the 16, there are no guest artists. In that sense, the album stands in stark contrast to Demon Days, which arguably served as the foundation for this record. The Good, the Bad, and the Queen most likely would not exist if not for Demon Days. Of the 3 singles from this album, only one received a music video, that being Kingdom of Doom, and despite not actually being a single, the title track, The Good, the Bad, and the Queen, received a music video as well. The Good, the Bad, and the Queen, the album, was received pretty favorably by critics. It peaked at number 2 and went gold in the UK, and 2 songs from the album, Greenfields and the title track, The Good, the Bad, and the Queen, were featured in an episode of Skins.
One day, his wife Eurydice was bitten to death by vipers.
You may recognize this actor, Nicholas Hoult, who's been in a ton of great stuff, like The Great, the X-Men films, Jack the Giant Slayer, just great stuff. In all fairness, I did like The Great, but in all honesty, I only watched it because, you know what, it doesn't matter. Of course, Nicholas Hoult was also in Nosferatu and the Chris Pratt Garfield movie, but other than that, I don't think he's been in anything super recently. I would remember if he was, especially if he was bald.
Bald! You are a bald! I'm not bald!
By the way, has anyone ever noticed how much his American accent sounds like Cole Sprouse?
I'm aware envy consumes my every waking moment.
I'm weird. I'm a weirdo. I don't fit in, and I don't want to fit in.
Anyways, though, speaking of great stuff, now that I've covered the group's history and the events leading up to this album's release, let's finally delve into the album itself. The Good, the Bad, and the Queen sounds very different from anything each individual member has done in their own careers before or since. The sound of this record is so unique and so interesting, I can't think of anything exactly like it. I've shown this album to a few of my friends throughout the years. One said it reminded her of the Beatles.
What do you think, George Harrison, of the Beatles?
I don't know, I'm just trying to get some more songs on the album,
And as Ringo Starr, I'm not so interested in meditation. I just like to have fun.
I like the little one.
And another said that the track 3 Changes sounded French, so do with that what you will. The mixing is very bass and drum heavy, but I don't feel as though the album itself leans too heavily on the talents of one particular group member. You can clearly hear each of their contributions on each track, and yet it feels so much greater than the sum of its parts. In my opinion, it's Danger Mouse's production that really brings the album together and gives it a certain seasoning that Mary Lane just doesn't have, sorry. The instrumentation of the album is really nicely textured and rough around the edges with instruments like acoustic guitar, piano, and organ. Everything feels very from scratch and homemade. It feels almost antithetical to an album like, say, Cracker Island or The Now Now, where everything is very smooth and polished and synthesizer heavy. There are some sparing synths sprinkled throughout, but they work as nice little accessories provided by Damon and by Danger Mouse, who also contributes percussion on Kingdom of Doom. And I just really like the chord progressions on this album. I don't think they're anything too crazy, but things like the chorus of Northern Whale and the verses of the Bunting song just sound so nice. All of these songs just feel really warm and dark and cozy, and when I first heard the chorus of Kingdom of Doom, oh my god, I felt like my life had been changed. There are so many interesting techniques used in both the performances and the production. One of my favorite examples is the high-pitched backing vocal on the Bunting song and 3 Changes. Reminds me of Big Mouth Strikes Again.
Give us all the details. Tie them on the main sound. Big Mouth, Lord of the Dog. Big Mouth Strikes Again.
If that indeed was their inspiration, which I don't think is impossible, it's a little bit funny because Damon actually reached out to Morrissey to feature on Humans and he said no, and yet Johnny Marr is about to be all over the mountain. I always love when albums have melodies or motifs that are reused multiple times throughout the runtime. I think it creates a real sense of cohesion and makes the work as a whole feel much more intricate and intentional. This project has a great example of that with this 2-note vocal melody that first appears in track 5, Herculean, and then reappears all the way at the end of the album during the title track. The tracklist is arranged perfectly, done once again by Danger Mouse. It flows really well and builds upon itself in a really interesting way. The final track is the perfect conclusion, and it just feels so kinetic and exciting. The Good, the Bad, and the Queen is a concept album about modern life in London. I've heard it's rubbish. A concept album, of course, is an album centered around a specific idea, theme, or story. Demon Days, Plastic Beach, and Humans are all concept albums, and so are The Wall, Tommy, and To Pimp a Butterfly. The lyrics of The Good, the Bad, and the Queen have all kinds of references to specific events and locations in and around London. Greenfields references Goldhawk Road, Nature Springs mentions Lord Hill's Bridge and Emperor's Gate, and Northern Whale references Tilbury. Northern Whale was actually written about a real incident back in 2006 where a bottlenose whale was found swimming in the River Thames and died as she was being rescued. It's really a very sad story. The song also interpolates As Tears Go By, specifically the version by British institution The Rolling Stones.
It is the evening of the day. In a tight town, everyone
As Tears Go By was written by Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, and their manager, Andrew Loog Oldham, but it was originally recorded and released by Marianne Faithfull, who we'll be coming back to, so don't forget about her. Interestingly enough, and you're really going to have to walk with me here because it's kind of a long story, all the way back in 1997, Bittersweet Symphony was built around a version of a different Rolling Stones song, that being The Last Time. This led to a lawsuit, even though technically The Last Time wasn't an original creation either. An alternate orchestral version is the one being sampled by The Verve, but the original was based on a 1954 gospel song recorded by the Staple Singers, including Mavis Staples, who would work with Damon much later in 2017 on the Gorillaz album Humans.
No, I've just realised that.
Damon,
I've just realised.
I love you, Damon. You're something else.
But it goes even deeper. The Staple Singers version was an arrangement of a sermon recorded in 1926. So, Bittersweet Symphony was a sample of an alternate version of a sample of a sample of a sermon. And the green grass grows all around, and the green grass grows all around. But despite all that confusing stuff I just said, it wasn't until 2019 that The Verve got the royalties back. They didn't see a penny of that money for over 20 years. And in the middle of all this mess, Jason Derulo joins the fight.
Jason Derulo, Jason Derulo, Jason Derulo.
He wants to sample Bittersweet Symphony for his 2010 single Ridin' Solo, but guess what? He can't get the sample cleared. The finished song still sounds pretty similar though, and in 2012, a cover version of Ridin' Solo was included in the 2012 video game Connect Star Wars, titled, of course, I'm Han Solo.
Like a star, you can't stop my shine. I'm loving Cloud City, my head's in the sky. I'm solo, I'm Han Solo, I'm Han Solo, I'm Han Solo, solo.
So, in conclusion, I'm Han Solo is a cover of a sound-alike of a sample of an alternate version of a sample of a sample of a sermon and was nearly 100 years in the making. Anyways, in a lyrical sense, The Good, the Bad, and the Queen could be compared to Blur's Parklife, but this album is much more melancholy, a rumination on the state of the country, for better or for worse. The good or the bad, it's all right there in the title, The Good, the Bad, and the Queen. The title is also derived from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, a film whose score Damon referenced years previously in the Gorillaz hit Clint Eastwood. It's worth noting that The Good, the Bad, and the Queen is a very British project, but not necessarily a British band. Tony Allen was Nigerian and Ghanaian and lived in France, and Danger Mouse is American and first got into music as a student at the University of Georgia, go Dogs, but it was actually Danger Mouse who encouraged the group to center the album around England. Everything they'd recorded beforehand had been much more Afrocentric. Despite all the references to contemporary London, the lyrics on the album are very metaphorical and almost mythical, with lines about floods and wars, and although this line from Green Fields references two very real events, the Iraq War and the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami respectively, the way they're written about makes them feel like an old legend or a fairy tale, maybe because Damon keeps mentioning dreams, but I will say that's not at all unique to this album because there is nothing Damon loves more than singing about dreams. There's probably more than that, but I decided to cut it off at 15. I truly think this is a 10 out of 10 album. Honestly, it's probably like a 12 out of 10. Every single track is perfect. All four members of the group, as well as Danger Mouse, were truly firing on all cylinders. There's not a single bad performance, not a single subpar song or awkward lyric. It's tightly written, skillfully performed, and masterfully produced. The Good, the Bad, and the Queen is perfect, front to back. It's what I like to think of as special occasions music that's so good and so exciting that it's reserved for special occasions, like an expensive sherry or a public salted caramel Heath bar cake. This album may not be quite as ambitious or expansive as Demon Days before it or Plastic Beach after it, but in my opinion, it's just 12 perfect tracks that work together flawlessly and create a transcendent masterpiece. The B-sides off each single are pretty good too. They've been compiled into a sort of fan-made album of their own. It's pretty good. Kingdom of Doom has 2 sketches of Devon tracks, Start Point and Halsand's Waltz. Herculean has my 2 favorites, Back in the Day and Mr. Whippy, featuring the album's only other guest, rapper Eslam Jawad. He released his debut album 2 years later, featuring Damon as well as Gorillaz collaborator De La Soul. He also introduced Damon to the Syrian National Orchestra for Arabic Music, helping lay the groundwork for what would become Plastic Beach. And Green Fields has 2 England Summer in black and white tracks, Doghouse and Polling Day. And the enhanced CD includes the original demo of Green Fields. It's a really interesting story actually. Damon recorded this demo after a night out and it sounds like it.
Lost the zone, taking down all the song, taking long. Oh, I got over, yeah, it's a bitter shade.
But he was out on the town with none other than Blur bassist Alex James and Marianne Faithfull. Damon gave her the tape, and she recorded and released it herself in 2005 under the title Last Song.
We saw the green fields turn into homes.
Fun fact, as of a few years ago, a Marianne Faithfull biopic was in the works with none other than Lucy Boynton in the starring role. She dropped out, was replaced, and the film is still in pre-production, set to be directed by Finnish director Zaida Bergroth. Zaida Bergroth, of course, is best known for her work directing Tova, the 2020 biopic about none other than Tova Jansen. Yeah! One of these days, I'm going to make a big conspiracy board because everything I've ever loved is connected somehow. Anyways, Damon rewrote and recorded the song for this album, and this version of the song tells the story of how the song came to be. It's really cool. It's kind of like your song in a way. Even though The Good, the Bad, and the Queen is meant to be about modern times, at least circa 2007, this album has a very old-fashioned atmosphere. It feels almost Victorian, Edwardian, and even medieval at times. It's a tiny bit anachronistic. I've mentioned this before when talking about this album, but it's also the perfect album for fall, even though it was released in January. I think the visual style and the presentation of this album contributes a lot to my interpretation of it. Something else I find interesting about this project is that it's not necessarily presented as an album. It's more of a song cycle or a mystery play in Damon's words. A song cycle, somewhat similar to a concept album, is a collection of songs based on a certain theme that are meant to be played in sequence as one entity. There are all sorts of examples within classical music, but some more modern song cycles include What's Going On, The Wall Again, and Lemonade. A mystery play is a dramatic reenactment, usually of a biblical event. They first became popular in medieval Europe. They would set up a stage in the town square, put on a performance, and people could gather around and watch it for free. The Good, the Bad, and the Queen definitely feels like a mystery play. Aside from a few instances of backing vocals from Paul and the 16, Danger Mouse was insistent that they avoid any harmonies and keep the album one voice all the way through. And I think because of this choice, the album feels like a sequence of songs written to be played through in one sitting as a unit. It feels like one cohesive performance that draws from hundreds of years of history. I would say that the album artwork is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. It contributes a lot to the old-fashioned feel. This album cover is my favorite album cover of all time. I could look at it for hours. I love the colors, I love the mood of it, I love the intensity. It was taken from The Tower and the Mint, an 1842 lithograph by Thomas Shotter Boys. If you open up the record, you can see it much more clearly. The vinyl insert has all of the lyrics typed out on Damon's trusty typewriter. There are a bunch of cool illustrations from Paul throughout, plus this one from Damon. The single art for Herculean was done by Paul too. The Kingdom of Doom CD cover is an engraving by... The Kingdom of Doom CD cover is an engraving by Wenceslas Haller from the 1600s, and the vinyl cover is an illustration of Trellick Tower by Paul. The Green Field CD cover is a collage of artwork from Alfred Leslie Rose and Gustave Doré, and the vinyl cover is another illustration from Paul. The overall design of the album was done by Will Bankhead. Thank you, Will Bankhead. So there's obviously a lot of London imagery here as well. As you may have noticed, the iconic Tower of London pops up pretty frequently. The Kingdom of Doom vinyl cover and music video both feature Trellick Tower, also known as the birthplace of Gorillaz. It shows up in a ton of their artwork and music videos too. This album has a very simple color scheme consisting of black and white, red, green, and of course, brown and orange. It is pretty basic, but I love it nonetheless. I think it's perfect. This aesthetic is somewhat carried over to the project's music videos and live performances. They toured Europe and the United States in 2007. I never got to see them live, and to this day, it's one of my biggest regrets. I wouldn't say the title track's video fits in here, but I do like the Kingdom of Doom video. It was directed by Chris Cunningham, who's directed music videos for Madonna and Björk. It's nothing too fancy or high budget, it's just a simple video of the group cooking and eating an extremely British breakfast together, and I do understand what they were going for with this color grading, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. It even has the recipe at the end written in the same style as the back cover of the album, which was designed by Gorillaz co-founder Jamie Hewlett. It's very simple, but it works so well and suits the album perfectly, and it's different from what you'd expect from Jamie based on his other work. And like I said, the visual style of the album art was also carried over to their live performances with the backdrop they performed in front of and the outfits they wore. I especially love the hats. I love their old website too. It's not up anymore, at least not in its original form, but you can find it if you go through the Wayback Machine. I just think the look of this website is super cool, and it has a lot of interactive elements that I think are kind of neat. My favorite part is their online store. You can't actually buy anything from it anymore or even access the actual merch page, but if you click the link to their shop, it takes you to an image of an alleyway with a sign pointing into the shop as if it's a store that you have to physically enter. I just think that's fun. It makes the site feel kind of rustic. I feel like I can picture exactly what the inside of the store looks like, all wood and leather, sort of cluttered, but in a nice way. There was also a now defunct fan page, goodbadqueen.com, for folks to share news and information about the group. You'll notice Danger Mouse is included as a member of the band here. There's a YouTube page by the same name where you can find the Kingdom of Doom video, but I cannot access the page itself, and it's not really archived on the Wayback Machine either. It's honestly a little strange. I've always thought that the best albums are the ones that feel like a world of their own. It's a part of why I love bands like Gorillaz and Queen, and why I love concept albums. I listened to the first two Queen albums and I feel like I'm physically in the kingdom of Rye. Like I'm there at the ogre battle. I listened to Plastic Beach and I feel like I'm physically on Plastic Beach. And I listened to The Good, the Bad, and the Queen and I feel like I'm in an old cobblestone kingdom or a countryside village of yore. I truly don't understand why this album is still so overlooked, especially because each individual member of the band is famous and was famous at the time the band formed. You would think that they would then have 4 built-in audiences, maybe even 5, that would immediately be interested in this project. I only discovered The Good, the Bad, and the Queen all those years ago because I'm a huge Gorillaz fan and I was looking through Damon's whole catalog. If you're a fan of Damon, Paul, Simon, Tony, and or Danger Mouse, I would absolutely recommend this album, obviously. I would recommend this album to anyone who's ever been alive. And as a huge Gorillaz fan, of course I have to mention the influence that Gorillaz had on The Good, the Bad, and the Queen, and vice versa. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, the Gorillaz album Demon Days was partially responsible for the group's formation in the first place, as that's the project that brought Damon, Simon, and Danger Mouse together. And again, the back cover of The Good, the Bad, and the Queen was designed by Jamie Hewlett. The strings you hear throughout the album are performed by an extremely talented group of individuals, including Stella Page, Isabel Dunn, Alice Pratley, and Antonia Pagulatos, collectively known as Demon Strings. The ensemble was originally assembled for Demon Days, and they continue to work with Damon on pretty much all of his projects. I always love looking through the liner notes for them. The Gorillaz song on Melancholy Hill, which was released as a single off Plastic Beach and became one of their biggest hits, began as a The Good, the Bad, and the Queen song titled Primrose Hill. And in 2008, at the Love Music Hate Racism Carnival, The Good, the Bad, and the Queen closed out their setlist with a cover of Ghost Town by The Specials, which was sampled in the Gorillaz track Slow Country off their debut album. But perhaps more notably, the group debuted a song by the name of Carousel with the Hypnotic Brass Ensemble. This song was never officially released. This was the only time they ever played it live, and there's no surviving footage of it. It's completely lost. I always thought that was kind of spooky, that a fairly well-known band could play a song in front of a huge crowd at a music festival, and nobody has any record of it. Like, what do you mean nobody has it? So this is actually a pretty big deal. I mean, not to most people, but like, I'm getting really excited. As you may know, in the late 2000s, Damon and Jamie Hewlett were working on an anthology film titled Carousel. It was going to consist of 15 multimedia short films, each representative of a stage of life, starting with birth, ending with death. The entire story would take place on a Victorian pier, and each short film would be set to music, meant to be performed in concert in order. You know, kind of like a song cycle or something. So in terms of the Victorian aesthetic and the cyclical nature, Carousel feels very similar to The Good, the Bad, and the Queen. In fact, it wasn't Damon or Jamie, but Paul who came up with the idea, and it was described by Damon as being, quote, an in-between of Gorillaz and The Good, the Bad, and the Queen. As you may also know, Carousel never came to be. Bits and pieces of the songs Damon wrote for it ended up in Plastic Beach, with several hours of additional music still unreleased and essentially lost media. The Good, the Bad, and the Queen and Plastic Beach are my two favorite albums, so I love that they each had such a large degree of influence on each other and that the infamous Carousel originated from The Good, the Bad, and the Queen. I would say for the Gorillaz fans watching that The Good, the Bad, and the Queen feels like the sonic midpoint between Demon Days and Plastic Beach. If Gorillaz had just been time traveling throughout the 1800s, it was released right in between the two. D-Sides was released a year later, and I honestly do feel like you can hear some of that The Good, the Bad, and the Queen style grit in songs like The Swagga, Spitting Out the Demons, even Murdoch is God. I really, really, really love The Good, the Bad, and the Queen, and I wish more people did too. I think they're massively underrated, criminally underrated, if you will. Like, it is almost impossible to buy this album on vinyl. You'll probably have to spend at least $200. I was lucky enough to find it listed on Discogs for like $50 by someone who I assume just didn't know what they had. Here it is next to all my other most prized possessions. This definitely won't be my most viewed video. In fact, it'll probably be my least viewed video, but the entire point of my channel is to talk about things I love, or hate, and to be able to share those things with you in the hopes that you may love them too, or hate them as much as I do. Like, I just think the world would be a much better place if we could all agree, unanimously, that Shane Dawson fucking sucks. But that's not the world we live in, is it? The point is, I love The Good, the Bad, and the Queen. It's my favorite album of all time. Not only is the music itself just flawless, the world it creates is just indescribably appealing to me. And I know that my perception of it mostly comes from my own imagination and from viewing this very British album through the lens of someone born and raised in Georgia. Go Dogs. But I think at this point I've earned the title of biggest The Good, the Bad, and the Queen fan. I may not have been old enough to be fully conscious of this first album, but I at least have to be in the top 50, right? It means so much to me. It's hard to even explain how much I love it. I've been hollering about it from day one, from my very first video. The Good, the Bad, and the Queen. By The Good, the Bad, and the Queen. 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 Yes, yes, it's funny every time. The Good, the Bad, and the Queen. 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 Say it with me, guys. The Good, the Bad, and the Queen. Yeah!
Mrs. Fiona Charming. Mrs. Fiona Charming. Mrs. Fiona.
There's probably more than that, but I decided to cut it off at 15. Ever since I started making videos on YouTube, The Good, the Bad, and the Queen has become the lifeblood of my channel. This album is the beating heart of my online presence. The visuals and aesthetics of this album in particular have become the basis of my entire art style, and it's definitely something I've tried to emulate with the appearance of my YouTube channel, my Patreon, and my Instagram page. I've always liked to draw, ever since I was a little kid, and up until I heard this album, I was going through a phase where I would just kind of copy whatever Jamie Hewlett or the Maximum Ride manga was doing. I must have been around 12 or 13 when I discovered The Good, the Bad, and the Queen. You know how sometimes you'll hear a song and like imagine a little animatic or a music video? This whole album was like that for me. It completely blew my mind wide open. Every time I listen to this album, I just get this image in my head of like this old-timey village and like sepia tones, shades of brown, and it's so charming and it's so quaint that I wish I could move there. When I listen to this album, any song from this album, I imagine these little vignettes from a village on an island hundreds of years ago. Oh, and what I forgot to mention is that all of these little vignettes in my head are animated in a very specific art style, which is my art style, the one I use now, which is pretty much an impossible task. It's like trying to draw something you saw in a dream. I could see so clearly this entire universe, these fully animated music videos drawn in a very specific art style that I just conjured up out of nowhere. I don't really know what inspired it. I think it was a lot of different things. Obviously the artwork from the album itself, but also a lot of old engravings, paintings, and lithographs, Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, of course, the cover of this book Tooth and Nail that I had to read for school. Unfortunately, I think maybe the mobile game episode.
Cass! Fucking Cass!
Make it out!
And artists I looked up to as a kid, like Brett Helquist and Brian Selznick. I didn't really know how, but I decided that I wanted to start drawing like that and to be able to communicate the things I was picturing, so I just started training myself to be able to do it. I kept drawing this man and woman. I still doodle them all the time whenever I get bored. When I started drawing fan art and posting it on Instagram, I kept it up. It got a lot easier to replicate what I was imagining after I switched over to digital. And every so often, usually in the fall, I would post stuff from my vision of the album. I also have these from 2021. This was another one for Nature Springs. This one was supposed to be for Green Fields. I even like soaked all of this paper in coffee because I knew that was what Paul Simon did for Maryland. You can still see like the coffee grounds on it. And I was going to start drawing on this paper and then I never did. For a while, I was color picking straight from an image of the album, but everything was coming out really desaturated, and I realized much later, after getting the vinyl, that the colors are a lot darker and richer in person. When I started making videos on YouTube, I tried recreating the general ambiance of the album with my thumbnails and channel banner and things of that nature. I was using warm colors and shades of brown and orange. I used this font called Rye, which looks pretty similar to Carnival-y Freak Show, the font often used in the Good, the Bad, and the Queen's branding. I was trying to emulate old books or scrolls, or like you were looking at an old desk with a quill. The design of the back cover made its way into my videos and my thumbnails. Even the emojis in my bio were just things. Like, in my head I call them queenly things. Their song Intro was my outro for a while. And I would use Northern Whale if I had to add in extra inserts while editing. Nowadays, I use the very end of the final track as my outro if I don't add a fun little treat at the end instead. I use different segments of that same song for the intro and outro of this series, Criminally Underrated Media, because, you know.
Obviously, the acronym being CUM.
The song is 7 minutes long. There's a lot to choose from. So I put a lot of thought into my drawings, and I put a lot of time into making sure everything looks a certain way. I have a reason for everything, even if it's not obvious to you as a viewer. So yeah, sometimes it is a little bit frustrating when to this day I get comments dismissing my content as AI slop, or worse, when an actual AI slop channel steals my ideas and nobody seems to care. That about brings us up to the present day though. The backgrounds I use in my videos each correspond to one of the 12 songs on this album. Let's go through them in order so you can see what they look like when I'm not standing in front of them. My drawing for Kingdom of Doom is drawn from the single art, same with Herculean. The tree and branch in my Green Fields drawing come from the vinyl insert. Three Changes is obviously taken from the album cover, it's just a different building on fire. But the rest of my backgrounds are either references to specific lyrics or just images that I picture whenever I hear these songs. My channel banner is inspired by a lyric from Kingdom of Doom. My profile picture is from the Penderwicks, I've talked about that before, but the colors are still consistent. For all these drawings, I use this color scheme I came up with. It's very simple. Behind the Sun and Green Fields are different because I just think of them differently. Behind the Sun always felt really red, like the exact color I see when I close my eyes, and Green Fields feels more desaturated, like an old silent film. I'm realizing now that I've thought about all this for years, but this is the first time I've really said it out loud, and I sound utterly insane. Well, I think that's everything you didn't ask for. That's what I'm about. Pretty much every facet of my channel is meant to convey the same feeling that I get when I listen to this album. And even though I've been going on and on about it, I kind of feel like I'll never be able to fully communicate it to you. The Good, the Bad, and the Queen just brings to mind the loveliest things like fall, crunchy leaves, fireplaces, pumpkin patches, pumpkin/apple/pecan pie, the trifecta, cinnamon brooms, actually anything that has pumpkin, cinnamon, and or nutmeg in and or on it, including candles. I guess probably treacle tarts, I've never tried one, old sailboats, old trains, beef stew, cobblestone streets, the woods, like in general, candles that look like this, lanterns that look like that, beer, mead, or ale in these types of mugs.
Until she can be presented with true mug's kiss.
Thatched roofs.
One of the skills I've always wanted to hone is that of thatching. Thatching? I've always wanted to do thatching.
I do love a little thatch.
We've seen some very rough thatches in Nottingham, actually.
Oh.
We've seen some
Gentle thatching.
thatching.
Yeah, here and there.
Pull of...
It's a very gentle thing to do, really. It's quite therapeutic.
This particular kind of vest. The creek by my grandparents' house where we used to have picnics in the fall. Kind of a niche one. Old-timey pubs, medieval times, both the actual time period and the themed dining experience.
He charges you $110 for chicken and potato and does not give you the dignity of a fork.
Yeah, I do want a fork. No grown man should have to eat a baked potato with his hands.
The old folk song Greensleeves, coincidentally recorded by Marianne Faithfull as a B-side for As Tears Go By.
Alas, my love, you do me wrong to cast me off discourteously.
Old maps, tapestries, roll-top desks with this specific kind of chair, Kirkland's, like the store, specifically the way it always smells in there. It's a good smell, but it kind of gives me a headache a little bit. Barrels. Just barrels. Halloween! I'm actually recording this on Halloween, which is so fun. Just imagine I'm wearing like a sick costume. Full/harvest moons. Those profile silhouettes. Puppet shows, specifically the kind with a fake stage and those little curtains. And finally, Tudor-style cottages. I know I'm just kind of throwing words at you right now, so I figure the best way to show you what I'm talking about is to show you what I'm talking about.
Bridge we must go, where the hearts bear
I've been wanting to make that for years and years. I think I first sketched it out in 2020, and I'd been kicking the idea around for a while before that. I just never did it because I didn't think I could. I didn't think I had the talent or the skill. I've never animated or anything like that before, except for my new backgrounds, which I did myself as well. And honestly, did it turn out exactly the way I've been picturing it all this time? No, but it's close enough, and I'm proud of myself for actually doing it and having some kind of proof of concept. I started working on the animatic in this video back in August, and I was planning to keep posting regularly, but once I started working on all this, I just didn't want to work on anything else, and I wanted to get it done by my birthday, November 14th, as like a gift for myself, I guess. I chose Nature Springs because out of all the ideas I have for this album, Nature Springs was always the easiest to picture and the most fully formed, if that makes sense. And I love every song on this album, but Nature Springs is my favorite. It's my favorite song of all time, and I hope I was able to do it justice. I double hope by now I've convinced you to check out this band and this album specifically, and listen all the way through. Do not put it on shuffle. You'll kill the momentum of the whole thing. I've included a link to The Good, the Bad, and the Queen's YouTube channel in the description, as well as the album itself, as well as links to all the songs I used in this video, like I always do, and if you're still not convinced, honestly, there's nothing else I can do for you at this point. Thank you for watching this episode of Criminally Underrated Media. Again, I really sincerely hope I've convinced you to listen or re-listen to The Good, the Bad, and the Queen. Please! To watch more episodes of Criminally Underrated, check out the playlist in the description, and to watch exclusive episodes, consider joining my Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. I promise I don't usually spend so much of the runtime talking about myself. Let me know down in the comments what you would like to see me cover in a future episode, and I will see you in the next one.